Well, hello, SWS world. I'm Hara Bastos here with
Vicky Demos.
Yay. Yes, and we are going to share Vicky's amazing story with SWS as part of the Institutional Memory Project. And so today is Friday, June 9th, 2023. So we'll go through our series of questions and then just have a conversation with each other. Sound good, Vicky?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, so let's start with the nitty-gritties of SWS itself. So how did you become a member?
Well, I was an off and on member until about the late 1980s. And then I really got involved through Marcia Texler Siegel. And I had met Marcia Texler Siegel at the North Central Sociological Association meetings. My advisor, my dissertation advisor, had introduced me to her because he had gone to Indiana University, and that's where Marcia graduated from. So I got to know Marcia in the North Central Sociological Association, and she was very, very involved in SWS. And through her and through our relationship, I became involved.
Mm-hmm.
I was interested in SWS initially because I was very much interested in discrimination, gender discrimination in higher education. When I went, at the time I went on the job market, it was the beginning of the baby boomer women coming along to these male fields, male dominated fields, and sociology was very male dominated. And as I came into the job market, people kept saying that these departments kept saying they were looking for qualified women. Well, this rankled me because it immediately made me feel I wasn't very secure in the beginning. And it made me feel even less secure because I wondered about how qualified I was, how capable I was. That's how I took it. And there were a lot of us out there, you know, looking for jobs, and many did not get interviews because these men were looking for, mostly men were looking for these qualified women. And, you know, what they were really looking for were men. They didn't want to hire women. And then when the place where I was hired, the University of Minnesota, Morris, was a very male-dominated faculty.
Okay.
And the social science was in the social science division, and it was very male-dominated. The woman who came into psychology the year after I was hired, she was the first woman hired in her area. I was hired as a second woman, the first woman, having gotten very upset because of the way the tenure reviews went. So it was a very rough going in the beginning, very rough going for those initial women coming out. And so I was interested in SWS, particularly it had this discrimination committee. I was interested in that. Also joined the international committee. But the international committee at that time was underdeveloped.
Mm.
I think that it was probably about the time that, let's see, it was about the time that Susan Lee came along that it started. What is your record?
I think you're about right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe one
recognition.
right before Susan, maybe that kind of like fruitioned it back up. Yeah. But I don't,
Yeah.
and there were times in between, but I can't recall those either. Yeah.
Susan, I thought that Susan Lee had really gotten that committee organized and
Mhm.
established, and there was a routine, regular attendance of the UN meetings, the Commission on the Status of Women meetings.
Mhm.
That was great. That was all through SWS, that international committee. The
Mhm.
international committee is a fabulous committee.
I would
And then you followed Susan
Thanks, Vicky.
in that leadership, and you did a terrific job.
Thank you.
So yeah, what was it? So I was talking about the international committee.
Mhm.
I was interested in that, and then I was not I did not become a committee chair until after I had been president of the organization.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. And in 1993, 1994, I became president of the organization. Now, when I entered the organization, there were, at that time, I think I thought of them as the two matriarchs, and they were Arlene Kaplan Daniels and Bess Hess. So they were the two matriarchs, and they kind of stood to the side and congratulated people and approved of what they were doing, you know, the nod or whatever, so you knew you were doing the right thing or not doing the right thing. Then Pauline Bart was in that. The story that I got, Pauline Bart, along with Alice Rossi, she contacted Alice Rossi, and they helped to establish the organization. Pauline Bart was all heart. She felt so much, and she was very much, before anyone, we were all into discrimination and equality. Pauline Bart was right there. Violence against women, rape and battering, and that was her thing, right from the beginning, from the 80s, you know. And so, and she wrote that wonderful article. Do you know about that article?
I think so. Yeah. One time before Pauline passed, she joined us in New York for the CSW. And I think she was sharing all of her work there. Yeah.
Okay, so it was a funny thing happened on the way to the orifice. So that's a classic
right
article. A wonderful feminist piece. So well done, so creative. She was very creative. And sometimes you had to have a lot of patience to be around Pauline.
Sure. Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. When I was president, I got to know Helena Zanyenska Lopata. Helena Lopata was the daughter of Florian Zanyensky, the Polish peasant in Poland and the United States, and America. The Polish peasant in, I think it was Poland and America.
Okay.
So she was a very interesting, lively person. And she was the JAI was a publisher. She was the JAI publisher of advances in occupational research.
Okay.
And she was instrumental in introducing Marcia Texer Siegel and me to her publisher, Herbert A. Johnson. And Herbert A. Johnson had learned, we had just published our first co-edited volume, and Marcia and I have been co-editing volumes together since 1994.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so she introduced us to Herbert, and she introduced us as having just finished this book on women, and it was about gender. It was a ethnic women, a multiple status reality. So in those days, we didn't have in our toolbox the intersectionality theme, but we knew that there was an intersectionality going on. Jewish women and Greek American women. And so we had this volume where we collected art chapters on multiple statuses, occupying multiple statuses and what that means. Okay, so Herbert looked at us and he said, well, what is gender all about anyway? And we said, gender is everything. So for some reason, he was impressed by that. He didn't have anything on gender, didn't have anything on women. He said, will you do this? Will you do a series? And that's how the series began. Wow. And through Helena Lopata that we got to know Herbert, and it went on like that. I got to know very well Mary Frank Fox. Mary Frank Fox is in the sociology of science and technology. And she's at Georgia Tech and has some kind of a chair position there. She was very impressive. Muriel Cantor followed me in the presidency, and she died in office. And the person that was to follow her was Mary Frank Fox. So Mary Frank Fox had to step up position. And Muriel was at American University, this same institution as now I'm glitching on her name, Esther Chow. When during my presidency, we focused on discrimination, and we had some presentations on class action suits. The University of Minnesota was involved in a class action suit. And the class was women, of course. And these were going on in different places in the United States. They stopped as institutions really got concerned about losing all that money paying off. And so they did a number of things to prevent those class actions. And then those number of things didn't always involve women getting a better deal. So, you know, there's been that change and that kind of support. And I also have observed the growth of from women's studies to gender and sexuality. As more and more research is undertaken, become more and more aware and knowledgeable about differences among people. You have a growth in the conceptual toolbox. You have so many more ways in which you can look at issues. So after my presidency, I became involved in the discrimination committee, and I did become a chair of that. And following that, I got more involved in the international committee. That's been a source of great satisfaction for me. It was in the international committee as a envoy, an SWS envoy to the UN, where I learned about the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. I was very surprised to learn about this, and I just recently looked up the statistic with respect to Greece. Greece ratified CEDAW in 1983.
Wow.
And, you know, and here we are in the United States. That doesn't mean they have equality. but they ratified CEDAW in 1983. And here we're in the United States, and we have not ratified CEDAW. I hadn't heard of CEDAW. I'm ashamed to say I hadn't heard of CEDAW until about when I became a member of the international committee, which was probably about 10 years ago. So, and then I learned that the United States had not ratified CEDAW. So I think I kept nagging at Susan about this. And so she finally took to you, Hara. And I think you two decided we got to get her busy doing something. I was at Hollins University, which is an all women's institution of 500 students. So it's small, a very effective campus, I think, in terms of kinds of things they do. So she started that, and we had another member of another student from that university on our committee. And we've been working on that, I guess, for a couple of years now. Now this year, I don't know if you know this, but Edelweiss.
Mm.
Edelweiss at her institution is starting, and Edelweiss Muerte.
I know exactly who you're talking about. I
And I
don't
can't
remember
remember the
last
whole.
names. Yeah, just first names.
Murillo La Fuente. Edelweiss Murillo La Fuente.
Okay.
Okay, so Edelweiss at where is she? She's at the University of Florida. She's a graduate student, and she is now our coordinator. She's coordinating
Awesome.
the colleges for CEDAW, and she starting one right at the University of Florida. There is someone else who is interested in starting one at the University of Connecticut.
Mm.
And she's on our committee. And again, I can't remember her name. I should have put these names down so that I could have them. But so that's sort of taken, it's sort of taking off. And I feel pretty good about that. It's given me a lot of satisfaction to be working on this and just to see this grow, and to be working with such interesting and capable people.
Mm-hmm.
It's really good.
Yeah, that's awesome. And hopefully what you were going to say? Hopefully it continues and flourishes.
Yeah, yes.
It will. I was just going to add, we could put, after all of this, we could put a list of all of the SWS members that you mentioned in writing. And so that can accompany this visual piece of it to have a marker for them too, right? Because some of them are no longer, some of those SWS members are no longer with us anymore, right? Either they've passed along or they're no longer active in the organization itself.
Yes.
So since they were integral, past and present to your story, it might be helpful to put that list together. Yeah.
Okay, then another aspect of being in SWS, well, I guess it's satisfying to be working with other people, to be mentoring them, but to be in a situation where I have received so many good things. So, I'm grateful for the people that I've been working with. Now, Marcia and I have this series, Advances in Gender Research. Many of the chapters in that series has come from SWS members. And that's been wonderful working with them in that capacity. So the organization is a great socialization vehicle. A great place to compare what you're experiencing, and to judge whether it should be acceptable or unacceptable. A great place to learn how to deal with difficult situations in academia.
Mhm. Oh, yeah. And with 40 years, over 40 years, right, of being an SWS member, that's really good advice too. Right? Of how SWS helped you along your journey, but then also what it still provides you as an emerita faculty member too. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. It's very cool. So let's see. What else can we add to this conversation, Vicky?
Okay, let me see.
Let's see. Well, we took care of the nitty gritties for SWS. Can we say in general? I mean, you added in a little bit about the sociology of gender, but more specifically, what got you involved with discrimination, right? But could you just speak about what was the study of gender like when you first started teaching, even?
Okay, when I first started teaching, there was no gender.
That's why I wanted it on the record. Right? There was nothing, right?
Yeah, there was no gender. And it's funny. I'm listening, I listen to mysteries, and there's this mystery that I listened to today.
Oh,
It was, yeah. And what they found some bones, and the detective is Vera. I don't know if you know Vera. She's from the northern part of England. She's on PBS, but I listen to the books. So Vera is, they describe her as this fat woman.
oh, interesting.
Yeah, but you really, it's really interesting. And so Vera asks this question about these bones, and she says, well, do we have any idea about the gender of these bones? And it hits me. Why are they talking about gender when they're looking at bones? Do they know the difference between gender and, they can make an approximation of sex.
Of sex, right.
Biological sex, Then it became clearer because there was also some material left, like black lace. Figured unless it was a trans guy, it was probably so. Yeah. So
your mysteries.
beginning, there was no gender. Beginning, there was no gender. And this is, when I say the beginning, I'm talking about 1978. So what we had in the beginning was sex roles. And it was all binary. And, and it was heterosexual, and it was all this normative stuff. And so you had sex roles in the beginning. And then it went into and there were women's studies. There was a study called women's studies. So I'm trying to remember how exactly what created the shift into gender, because when I came in, the other woman who was there,
Mhm.
more senior to me by a couple years, she was teaching sex roles.
Mm.
And then she left because she didn't like the treatment of how she was treated at the tenure review. And it was bad. The tenure reviews on that campus at that time was open to all faculty. You
Oh,
could be
goodness.
junior faculty, you could be incoming faculty. So if you were incoming faculty and you sat there and you listened to some of this stuff,
Mhm.
it was really scary.
Mhm.
They weren't, closed meetings. They
Mhm.
were confidential, but they weren't closed.
Mhm.
So she left, and then I took the course and I said, well, we don't talk about sex roles anymore. It's more gender. So I turned that course into a sociology of gender course.
Mm.
But I don't remember at that time differentiating biological sex and gender and sexuality.
Mm.
I don't remember doing that. Then I taught a course called Systems of Oppression.
Mm.
And in that course, I dealt with LGBTQ issues because I wanted to deal with those, but I didn't have a way to do it in the gender course necessarily.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I took this, I did this system of oppressions, and then because I could also include in that systems of oppression, race, and ethnic
Mhm.
issues.
Mhm.
So I think I dealt with the major ones that were coming out at the time.
Mhm.
The major, at that time when I was teaching, we had not yet, at least in mainstream sociology, had discussed trans issues.
Mhm. Mhm.
Became a more recent.
Yeah, because that would have been the early 80s, right? When you started
Yeah,
this.
yeah,
Mhm. Right. Yeah.
yeah. So and I've learned a lot more too because of these volumes that
Mhm.
Marcia and I do. So we need to, it's called Advances in Gender Research.
Mhm.
So we need to look for what's on the front, what's coming up, what are the new frontiers.
Mhm. Even the name of that journal, didn't you and Marcia switch it into something? Its current title wasn't always its title, right?
Yeah,
What was it before?
it was Advances in Gender Research always.
Always.
Yeah.
So,
By the time we got it, it was the 90s.
oh, right, right. So at that, I'm just putting it all together, right? Because over then that 10-year time span, the points that you were bringing in about the sex roles and switching it over to gender had become, right, much
Yeah, that had already
commonplace.
happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
that had happened in the beginning, and then there were.
yeah. Which is why then we are where we are today, right? In 2023, and really having the conversations moving forward Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very cool. So speaking of research, what did you do your dissertation on?
Oh, now here, this is women volunteers,
Oh,
the female role and participation in women's voluntary organizations.
mm,
Now, I did my master's thesis on the Maumee Valley Girl Scout the Girl Scout Council.
okay.
And this Girl Scout Council had come to the University of Toledo
Mhm.
and they said, we want to find out how we can keep our women volunteers.
Mm.
And so this came up as a research problem.
Mhm.
And my cohort was asked if we were interested in this problem. And I grabbed it.
Mhm.
I grabbed it because I was looking to my second year and I didn't know what I was going to do my thesis on. And the cohort ahead of me hadn't done anything.
Mm.
There was no model.
Right, right.
So I was like desperate in the wilderness out there in the Midwest.
Literally, right? Not just, yeah.
So I grabbed this and I didn't think it was particularly glamorous. I didn't, which,
Mhm.
where my mind was at that time. I didn't think it was that great, I wanted something really
Pizzazzy.
yeah. So I did this study and essentially you could probably guess what kept the what the problem was.
Mm.
They had women volunteers in the organization as long as their daughters were in the organization. And then once their daughters were in the organization, they dropped the organization.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that the insight that I had now looking back on it was that there were some of them who could make a shift,
Mm.
being their daughter, being head of their daughter's Girl Scout troop, into the upper levels of the organization. And that's where you needed to find the people to get them to make the shift.
That's an important finding. Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you able to then share your results directly with the Girl Scouts?
Yeah, then I gave a report back. And now here again is what was happening. I offered this. Yeah, what did I do? I proposed this as a paper to give at some session. I don't know whether it was at an organization meeting session. And it wasn't accepted. It was it, and I got the feeling it wasn't really a testosterone type of You know, and, you know, because it was Girl Scouts who's interested in that, and it's just women. And
Yeah. No, but yeah, I know.
so,
But
okay,
right, it solidified what you were saying, the difficulties of then transitioning into a full-time faculty position, right? Because even not just the social environment of the workplace, but also the very research that you were involved in. And that still happens today, right? You still hear those stories of the research that's not as glamorous, right? That doesn't get picked up, or it doesn't receive its due audience. And so journals like yours, right, can also try to fill in those spaces that those who are still stuck in traditional ways can't really see past, right?
yes, yes, and it shows you that I did not have a well enough at that time, a well-developed sense of myself.
Mm.
Tough. I know this is good. And I'm going to keep with it.
Yeah. Well, you did, because then you took that as like the basis, it sounds like, to then expand and do your dissertation off of. Right?
Yes. Well, when I got into the PhD program, the advice that was given to me, this is an exercise, you have to do it and get it done so you can get the degree. And, you know, do this, you know, continue working on women volunteers. And I really wasn't that interested in continuing to work on that. And a lot of, and I did a couple of, I made a couple of mistakes with that. Mistake was not being interested in it.
Yes. Yeah.
A second mistake was that I went out and I had interviews with 25 women. And that was my preliminary, the preliminary study. That wasn't my, I didn't consider that real data collection. So that was my second mistake. You know, I kept putting myself down, really. And then a third mistake I made with that was that I was only looking at the American Sociological Review. The American Sociological Review, all it had were mobility studies. And mobility studies were these variable studies, and what you would do, you'd have these large data sets, and then you go in and you do an analysis of those large data sets. And then you come out with your findings. So, and at that time, you probably have never heard of path analysis.
I have, yes.
You have, okay.
What makes you think I haven't?
I thought, because I haven't seen it since I was involved in it.
Since you, yeah, I think I mean, from grad school. Yeah.
Okay, but you haven't seen it since.
Oh, goodness. No, but I also haven't been looking. So,
Okay, well, that might be with the case with me, but anyway,
yeah.
so there were these two new faculty members at Notre Dame. I got my degree at Notre Dame. These two new faculty members, and the one, all he could talk about was path analysis. He should be doing path analysis, all that. So I said, okay, that's what I'm going to do, because that would really prove I was a sociologist. I was going to be a real hard-nosed sociologist, and that's what they did.
Mm.
And even my dissertation director, well, I went through 2 dissertation directors before I got my final one.
Okay.
What happened to the first 2? They left. Left Notre Dame.
Not because of you.
Not because of me.
Right. Fair to say. Yeah.
Okay, so this, my dissertation director looks at me, he says, why are you doing this stuff?
Oh.
And I said, this is what you're supposed to do. This is the newest stuff.
Yeah.
My dissertation director had been in the field like 5 years more than these other guys that had left. And, we're okay. So I said, yeah. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. So I did it, not really having a handle on what I was doing. It was really, I was paying more attention to the model than I was to understanding what was going on within volunteers. So that was the third mistake. And then the fourth mistake that I made was I had read after and I wanted to write an article, but I couldn't write an article on I decided that I couldn't write an article on my dissertation because I did not have a random sample.
No.
I had a sample. I did not have the whole population, and I didn't have a random sample of the population. And that was another place where I got stuck.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand, because I had come out of graduate school with this hard-nosed view of sociology.
Mm.
And I only went into sociology because of all the ethnographic studies that I read. So there was this kind of juxtaposition of the two. On the one hand, I really liked the ethnographic studies, but on the other hand, I wanted to be respected as a hard-nosed sociologist.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very good. In a way, SWS helped to save me from myself.
Yeah.
It was a lot of this had to do with this male model of sociology
Mm-hmm.
Even I didn't mention Carla Howery.
Okay.
Howery was president of SWS before I became president. She was wonderful. She was wonderful and very supportive of me. And I remember her one time saying this very thing, that, this is why many women are sociologists, because they like those ethnographic studies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that's the kind of study they like to do, and to read about.
Mhm. So a shift, right, in the way of thinking, but then also how the research itself could be transformative, both professionally and for the entire field of sociology.
Yes,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yes. And see, that this is something else. I think the readership of the gender in society,
Mhm.
I think there may be a greater readership of that than of the ASR.
Mm, I'm sure. If not, it is in our world. No.
Nothing.
Yeah.
There's a it it's very competitive with it, but in that
Right.
premier journal of sociology.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you said that SWS saved you from yourself. So did you felt that at the beginning when you were working towards your degrees? Did you feel that also in your early career? Would you say that that was also applicable
Now,
of how SWS being there for you?
oh, SWS was later on. It was like later on.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just putting all the pieces together again,
Yeah,
right?
I
For the whole.
started off. You I started out at an institution. Well, it's Towson State College
Okay.
and University now. It's a undergraduate institution,
Hmm.
and I didn't know too many people that went on to graduate school.
Mm.
Uh, and then I went off, and then I went to the University of Toledo,
Mm-hmm.
and then from there I was one of very few to go on
Mm.
for
Your
doc.
master. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So, and then you ended up in Morris, right? So when you were there,
Yes,
you
yes, and
started
that
there and retired there also.
yeah, I
Yeah.
retired and then moved back to um, the East Coast.
Mm. You said farewell to the Midwest indefinitely.
Yes, yes, my my husband and I moved back here. My mother was elderly and needed help, so
Mm.
did that
Mm-hmm.
back, and my brothers and their families are here.
Hmm.
So the Midwest, the I spent many years in the Midwest. I guess from the time I was 22 to the time I was 56.
Hmm. So you retired when you were 56?
I did. I took early retirement.
Oh, that's my dream, Vicky. Yeah.
Yeah, and yes,
Yeah. And your early retirement was that, I mean, it was that related to the pieces of discrimination that you were talking about, or just a life transformation, would you say?
well, it had to do with it was mostly my mother
Yeah.
needing.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to make that clear. Yeah, for everyone as far as, trying to set out your career path, and then where it took you and what you were able to do with your life, and then how and why you're still so involved in SWS today. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because despite your retirement, I feel like but well, and your presidency, I suppose, right? But other than that, since I've known you, how active you are in SWS still, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, I, you know, uh, a major part of my identity is being a sociologist.
Mhm. Yeah.
And what I like about SWS is that it's sociologists for women in society.
Mhm.
I've had two kinds of focuses in my life. Well, maybe three. One has been on race.
Mhm.
When I was in college, we had in downtown Baltimore
Mhm.
the racial uprisings,
Mhm. Mhm.
and those really made an impression on me.
Mhm.
And Baltimore was a city that you could, it was highly segregated.
Mhm.
There were, white sections of the city, and you never saw a black person.
Mhm.
And then there were the black sections of the city, and then you'd be surprised when as a kid going into some sections and you see black people, you never seen them before.
Mhm.
Who are they? And our municipal pools were segregated.
Mhm.
Everything was segregated.
Mhm.
And so one of the a major article that I wrote early on was on the distortion in the black family, study of marriage and the family. And it was an analysis of the Journal of Marriage and the Family and distortion over the years of black family in that. So I did that. I taught in that area. My dissertation director is black.
Mhm.
I have kind of almost weekly conversations with him now. He's in an assisted living facility, so he's not doing very well. But wait, but we have,
But your relationship is still there after all these years. That's cool.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. It's really been nice. So then when we moved to Salisbury, Maryland,
Mhm.
the things when in Morris, Minnesota, where I lived, it was a farming community of 5,000 people. And to get to an urban area, you had to drive at least 2 hours.
Mhm.
And you'd be in an urban area, but it was really a rural area.
Mhm.
We here in Salisbury, Minnesota, and Salisbury, Maryland, it's considered a rural area, but the city is about 60,000 people. There's a lot of, and then there are people all around the city,
Mhm.
and it has a black population.
Mhm.
So when I came out here, one of the things that I wanted to do was to join the NAACP. So I did that, and I've been very active in that up until the last year, but I've kind of laid off a little bit because I'm trying to get a book done. But
always working, Vicky. You're always working. Yeah.
yeah, so I was just saying about the NAACP. That's been good. Working in there in that area. When I have also introduced gender issues, or talked about gender.
Cool.
A CEDAW presentation to the organization.
So all the things that are important to you and that drew you in, through SWS, you've been able to take into your local NAACP chapter as well.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I had done when I came out here, I learned about this group, PALS, Peace Alliance for the Lower Shore. And they had been reestablished themselves with the Iraqi war. And they did these demonstrations standing on a main street corner every Sunday. Oh,
wow.
So I did that for a few years.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I consider that also a part of my sociological work.
Yeah, that's why I asked you the question earlier with the Girl Scouts, because it really seemed like applied work, which is also something, that traditionally the discipline never fully embraced. And up until recently, right, is even willing to have conversations about how beneficial for entire communities applied sociological work becomes, right? Let alone for the professional sociologists themselves, right?
Right. And in fact, now that you bring that up, we did a 2-volume publication on practice.
Nice.
On gender and practice. And we had chapters from all over the world.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, and that's just it, right? Always making sure that gendered aspect is part of the conversation, and then it really becomes intersectional with all of its other pieces too.
Yes. So I have been working on that, on those two, kind of race and gender and ethnicity, but as separately and together, intersectionally.
Absolutely. Yeah. So does that mean you're going to continue all of this work for as long as you can? Is that safe to say?
Well, at this point, yes. Yeah, I think so.
That's a good answer. I wouldn't have expected otherwise, but you never know what other things come through in life, right? But since you said being a sociologist is such an important part of your identity, it seems like you'll always find spaces to make it thrive.
Yes.
That's cool. Yeah. And even more involved with SWS, right? With all the, and I will say, yes, you totally took that subcommittee by charge, Vicky. So everything that CDAW does, as far as for SWS, is really under your leadership. So it's glad that you thanked me as far as, right, allowing and giving you that space with Susan so that you could shine in this part of your life and then continue to be active in our organization.
Yes, I really like doing this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in fact, it's even on the summer program too. One of the workshops about advocating for women's and gender rights advocates again who are being attacked by the far right.
Oh, yeah,
And you started that
yeah,
series,
that's right.
right?
That comes
With
from,
Esther. Mm-hmm.
right, with Esther. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's now become a institutional part, right, of our programming. Mm-hmm. An exciting, I shall say, institutional part of our programming. Yeah.
Yeah, we have some very enthusiastic and capable people on the committee, and Esther is one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's great too. It sounds like, from over the years when you first started with SWS and then just finding places that connected with your own passions and then opened up new opportunities for others, and not shying away from the difficult moments, right? But trying to learn with them and through them and continue to still be a part of SWS. Right?
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
That's very nice.
I'm not lying, Vicky. I'm lying. No. Yeah. So is there anything else you think you want to add about you, your life, SWS?
I'm working on this last thing that I'm presenting at RC 32.
Oh, yes, yes. So tell everyone what RC 32 is.
RC 32 is the research committee on gender and 32nd committee of the International Sociological Association.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so I'm doing a paper on the church, women's rights, and the state in Greece.
Mm-hmm. How's that going?
And it's been a very challenging kind of problem, because as I start it's a bigger problem than I first chewed off.
Yeah.
Actually, I guess it's actually more than I can chew. It's more than I've been able to chew, but I better start chewing.
Well, you've been chewing at a lot of things throughout your life, so why not take on this next challenge? Mm-hmm. Starting from your voluntary organizations, right, to powered, mandated, shall we say, right, by the state and its relationship with religion and women within that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What made you switch into that?
Well, that was, I've been working on a book on Greek women from 1990.
Mm,
And I collected data in Greece, the United States, and Australia.
cool.
And I interviewed 95 women in those three places.
Mm,
And they ranged in age from 21 to 95 at the time.
mm,
So I had a view of them across the century.
mhm. That's cool. Yeah.
And that was the first thing I did, was I looked at differences among cohorts, but birth cohorts. But what the very most interesting of the women were those in the earliest cohort, because the ones who had come to the United States or come to Australia, many of them came to marry, and they didn't need a dowry,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why they came.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I looked at the dowry in Greece, and it wasn't until 1983 that it was delegalized. It had been part of the law until that time.
And was it 1983? You said the year for the CEDAW.
Yes, many things happened in that year.
Because of that. This
Yeah,
is how it's all coming together, Vicky, for you. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Aha. So now you're trying to capture where these same women are globally, or a whole separate group?
Well, what I did was I started off looking at them,
Mm-hmm.
and I started looking at the kind of I kind of developed hypotheses from these groups, and then started chasing after those hypotheses by going through the literature.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the last thing I've looked at education and these groups,
Mm-hmm.
that the dowry, because I think that's very important.
Mm-hmm.
And an important piece that I hadn't looked at was the church.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
and how that was related to those,
Yeah.
how those groups related to the church.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But what I found out, which is very interesting, and it has to do with this idea of these oppressive regimes.
Mm-hmm.
In 1989, with the breakup of the Soviet Union, all these countries, Eastern European countries, became independent, and they went back to being Orthodox. So what's happened in those countries is that the place that the Soviet Union played in those people's lives is now played by the Eastern Orthodox Church quite frequently.
Yeah.
And a lot of these, and in these countries too, at least in one of these countries, population is an issue, because they want to make sure they have enough males to fend off Russia as an aggressor.
Mhm.
like Belarus. Belarus is one place. So they want women to have babies.
Mm.
And so they promote that.
Mhm.
And now, there's this issue in Greece with the population.
Mhm.
And there's a fear of denationalization of Greece.
Yeah.
And the women's rights people are calling this the so-called demographic problem.
Because they can see through the lies, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You've probably lived through quite a few experiences, and you've shared some this afternoon, right? Of,
Yeah.
you say, the misinformation and the mislabeling, right? And the anti-feminist backlash
And the anti-feminist backlash.
for
Yeah.
just trying to share your experiences and enlighten what
Yes.
those are.
And what church officials have said is that these militant feminist views are just sinful.
Yeah. And what's worse than that is that they think that that's an insult, you know?
And what they say is these militant feminism is bad. So I guess there's a kind of feminism that isn't bad, but
Oh my gosh. I know. I know.
yeah.
Speaking of feminism, do you have a early memory of when you um first really accepted yourself as a feminist?
Oh, that's a good question.
Mhm.
Um, a colleague and I once made these cards called, and they were labeled card carrying feminists.
Mm.
Um, I really can't think.
No, that means it's probably been a part of you for a really long time, right? It's origin story.
Yes,
Yeah.
always been ornery.
Yeah. Yeah. And that makes sense too, along your career path and everything else. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just more curious, your colleague when you were at Morris or
Yeah,
beforehand at Morris? Okay.
yeah. We
Okay.
made these little cards called card carrying feminists.
Uh-huh. Yeah, which you needed at that time period, especially, right? Um, when you were really outnumbered. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm. Mhm.
some of the ludicrous stuff that,
No, right. I know. I could only imagine.
right.
Yeah. But I guess it brought you, focused on your professional pathway, supported how you already thought in your life personally, and why then SWS became that professional home for you all that time.
Yes, what, as you were talking,
Hmm.
I keep thinking of the title of this book, and it is there has always been a women's movement this century.
Mm. Hmm.
Do you remember that?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I probably have always been a feminist,
Hmm.
but not really conscious of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Makes sense.
And I guess it goes back to, I remember a friend, my best friend growing up, and we would go downtown with these two other friends of ours.
Mm-hmm.
And they would go to a department store where they would try on wedding gowns.
Oh no.
Yeah, that's what they said they did. I couldn't believe it. And my friend Judy and I, we went to, there was this kind of beatnik bar.
Hmm.
I think we tried to sneak into the beatnik bar.
Yeah. Your feminist rebel has, I feel, yeah, been a part of you. Mm-hmm. You're like, forget the dresses. We'll be over here. Mm-hmm. That's fun.
Well, we grew up in 1950s America,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a very rigid kind of world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm.
1950s white America,
Yeah,
white middle class America.
even more so. Sure, sure. In Maryland, right? That would have been.
Yes,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
in Baltimore.
And in Baltimore. Which then most definitely is why, as you were saying earlier, how you've always been connected to race and the ways in which that becomes a part of trying to make sense of the world, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then to offer an honest critique of that world. Yeah, as a sociologist. Mm-hmm. That also makes sense then from why your master's and dissertation projects were never really your own per se, right? But what you felt you needed to do at that time to get through.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay.
I had an idea that I wanted to write a theoretical dissertation.
Oh,
And there was this professor that I had in graduate school, Fabio da Silva.
mm,
Fabio da Silva was from Brazil. And he had been in his previous life a fashion designer.
okay.
And then he taught theory at Notre Dame. And he always had these ideas of different theorists that no one ever heard of, or weren't mainstream astrological theorists. So we would read Merleau-Ponty, and some others. And some others. And that to me was very, very glamorous.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I was told, come back from there.
Yeah.
Do something sensible.
But those memories, right, still lingered on, which have always been a part of who you are and why you're still here. Mm-hmm. For sure. Very cool.
Yeah. So, thank you for interviewing me.
Oh, thank you so much for agreeing to do this and for us having your story on the record for in perpetuity. Yes,
And we're the first to do
we
this.
are the first.
Oh, that's good.
So honored, Vicky.
No. Now, how do you think, let me ask you a question about you would like names, right?
I'm gonna stop the recording, right? Okay.
Okay,
Or
good.
do you want me? Yeah, right?
No, yeah, stop. You can stop the recording.
Mhm. Are you sure?